Hey Yankees fans, things are getting really interesting in the Bronx right now. The off-season rumors are heating up, and one of the names that keeps coming up might surprise you. Pete Alonso. Yeah, the polar bear himself could be on the Yankees' radar. It sounds wild, right? But when you break it down, it actually makes a lot of sense, and at the same time, it brings a whole lot of questions about what the Yankees really need moving forward. So, let's start with what kind of player we're talking about here. Pete Alonso had a year that, honestly, was a bit of a roller coaster. He ended the season with solid numbers, hitting around .270 with nearly 40 home runs, over 120 runs batted in, and an OPS close to 900. Those are elite hitting numbers, no doubt about it. But if you dig a little deeper, you'll notice he had some brutal stretches in there too. That month of July, for example, was just plain ugly. He hit around 140, and his OPS dropped to the 500s. It was bad, the kind of month that makes you wonder what's going on. But credit where it's due, Pete rebounded strong. Once August and September rolled around, he was back in beast mode, launching home runs left and right, putting up OPS numbers above 900 again. Now imagine him in a Yankees lineup between Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. That would be fireworks in the Bronx. 3 massive power bats back-to-back. Any pitcher would have nightmares just thinking about that order. The sheer amount of pop in the middle of that lineup would be ridiculous. But that brings us to the big question. Does it actually make sense for the Yankees to go after Pete Alonso? There are reports floating around that Pete wants a 7-year deal. 7 years. That's a long commitment, especially for a player who's already turning 31 next season. When you start doing the math, that kind of deal could easily reach over $200 million if he keeps his average annual salary anywhere close to what he earned with the Mets. He made around $30 million on his last deal, and even if that drops to, say, $27 million per year on a long-term contract, you're still talking about roughly $190 million, maybe $200 million total. That's a huge investment for someone who, let's be honest, is not known for his defense. Defensively, Pete's numbers aren't pretty. -9 defensive runs saved, -9 outs above average, and -8 in fielding run value. He's not what you'd call a reliable first baseman. Realistically, he's the kind of player you eventually move to designated hitter. And that's where things start to get complicated for the Yankees. Because if there's one player the Yankees want to protect and eventually transition to DH, it's Aaron Judge. Judge has been the heart of this team for years. And even though he can absolutely handle the outfield, the front office surely wants to preserve his body for the long run. He's your franchise guy, and you want him healthy and mashing baseballs for as long as possible. In 2 years, Giancarlo Stanton's contract ends, and once he's gone, the DH spot naturally opens up for Judge. That transition makes perfect sense. But if you sign Alonso now, and he ends up needing to be your DH in a few seasons, then where does Judge go? You'd basically be stuck with 2 players who can't play the field every day, and that's not a position you want to be in. So yeah, Pete Alonso is an elite hitter, but as a full-time first baseman, he's below average defensively. That setup would be eerily similar to the Jason Giambi situation years ago. Tons of power, no question, but limited glove work and not much flexibility. And for a team like the Yankees, flexibility is everything. You want players who can handle multiple roles, shift around when needed, and not lock you into one-dimensional roster spots. If it were up to me, and I were running the Yankees, the kind of contract I'd consider for Alonso would be shorter, maybe 4 years for around $120 million total. That still gives him a big payday, keeps him happy, but limits the long-term risk. For years, roughly $30 million per year, that's fair. But the reality is, Pete probably wants more. The reports saying 7 years sound about right. He wants that long-term security, especially since by the end of that deal, he'd be 38. It's his chance for one last massive contract. Now, if the Yankees did decide to bring him in, we'd also have to talk about what that means for Ben Rice. Rice is a lefty bat who's shown promise, but he struggles against left-handed pitching. Pete Alonso, on the other hand, crushes right-handed pitching but is only average against lefties. So, when you look at the overall balance, adding another righty slugger might not be the smartest move. The Yankees already lean heavily on right-handed bats. The idea would make more sense if you were trying to balance things out with a left-handed power hitter, but that's not what Pete brings. And let's not forget, if Rice and Austin Wells are still part of the roster on opening day, bringing in Alonso could create a bit of a logjam. Both Rice and Wells can rotate between catcher, first base, and DH, but adding Alonso to that mix limits everyone's opportunities. You'd essentially be forcing Rice and Wells into smaller roles, or even sending one of them down. From a roster construction standpoint, it doesn't feel like a great fit. To me, this might be more about leverage than anything else. You know how it goes? Agents float the Yankees' name around to get other teams, like the Mets, to act faster or raise their offers. And Scott Boras, Pete's agent, is a master at that game. It wouldn't be the first time someone used the Yankees as a bargaining chip to drive up their price. And think about it, Pete's going to be 31 on opening day. If he signs that 7-year deal, he'll be 38 by the end of it. Do you really want to lock up that much money in a player whose main strength is his bat, especially when his defense and base running aren't strong? It's a risky move for a team that already has aging stars and long-term contracts to manage. If the Yankees are planning to throw around that kind of cash, there might be better options. Cody Bellinger, for instance, could be a more versatile pickup. He can play left field, right field, even first base when needed. Now, don't get me wrong, he's not the perfect center fielder. His numbers there last season weren't great. In over 300 innings in center, he posted -3 defensive runs, saved, and -1 out above average. That's just about average. Not what you want from your everyday center fielder. But in the corners, Cody is fantastic. In right field, he had 8 defensive runs saved and 2 outs above average. That's excellent defense, exactly what you want for those spots. So if you're going to invest heavily, why not invest in a guy who gives you power and defensive flexibility? Bellinger also brings that left-handed bat the Yankees have been missing. If they brought him back on a 6 or 7-year deal, it would make more sense than committing that same length of time and money to Alonso, who's strictly a first baseman. Then, once Giancarlo Stanton's contract ends in 2 years, you can shift Judge into the DH role full-time, keep him healthy, and still have Bellinger covering one of the corners. That setup gives the Yankees balance, offense, defense, and roster flexibility. But there's another name to consider too, Kyle Tucker. Now, Tucker would cost way more, no doubt, but he's younger, around 28 or 29, and arguably a better overall player than Bellinger. If the Yankees are serious about improving their lineup long-term, going after Tucker could be a smarter play. He's a complete hitter, strong defensively, and still in his prime. The price tag would be steep, sure, but if the goal is to bring a championship back to the Bronx, sometimes you have to take that kind of swing. Still, the Yankees haven't been the kind of team lately to go on massive spending sprees from multiple top free agents. The fan of me would love to see them go wild. Bring in both Cody Bellinger and Kyle Tucker, load up the roster with talent, and make a serious run at the World Series. That would be a dream scenario. But the realist in me knows the front office probably won't take that route. They'll be cautious, calculated, and maybe a little too careful. As for Pete Alonso, there's no denying his talent. The guy can flat out hit. When he's locked in, few players in the league can match his power and production. But when he slumps, it's rough. There's almost no middle ground with him. You're either getting one of the most dangerous hitters in baseball or a guy who looks completely lost at the plate. For the Yankees, the question is whether that risk, combined with his defensive limitations, is worth such a huge financial commitment. So let's keep going, because the Pete Alonso conversation doesn't end with just numbers and positions. It's about what kind of identity the Yankees want to have in the next few years. Right now, they're at a crossroads. The lineup still has power, yes, but it lacks consistency. There were way too many nights last season where the bats just disappeared. Judge can't do it alone every single game, and Stanton, while still dangerous, has battled injuries and long slumps. Adding another elite bat like Alonso sounds tempting because it gives you that instant pop, that threat every time he steps into the box. But the question is, are the Yankees trying to build a team full of sluggers again? Or are they finally ready to balance out the roster with more complete hitters? Because we've seen this movie before. Remember the era when the Yankees stacked their lineup with pure power guys who could hit 40 homers but also strike out 200 times? It looked great on paper, but come October, when pitching gets tougher, that one-dimensional style just doesn't hold up. You can't win every postseason game waiting for a 3-run homer. You need hitters who grind out at-bats, who put the ball in play, who can adapt. And that's not Pete Alonso's game. When he's hot, he's incredible. When he's cold, he vanishes. That kind of streakiness can kill a team when it matters most. Then there's the defensive side again, and I know we touched on it, but it's important. Alonso's defense at first base has been a liability. You can hide a bad glove for a little while if the bat makes up for it, but in tight games against elite teams, every mistake matters. The Yankees have been burned before by poor defense in critical spots, and it's not something they should ignore. You can't just assume you'll hit your way out of every problem. If the Yankees really wanted to add power but still maintain flexibility, someone like Cody Bellinger continues to make more sense. He's not just a bat, he's an athlete. He can handle multiple positions, and even if he's not a lead in center anymore, he's still way more versatile than Alonso. Plus, his left-handed bat brings a dynamic that the Yankees lineup desperately needs. Right now, they're too right-handed heavy. It makes them predictable. Opposing teams can load up on right-handed relievers late in games, and the Yankees have no counter. Bellinger helps solve that. But let's be real. All this talk about who the Yankees should or shouldn't sign comes down to one thing: money and risk. Hal Steinbrenner has been clear he doesn't want to blow past payroll limits like in the old days. The team is trying to be smarter, more efficient. So if they're going to commit a long, expensive contract, they better be sure it's the right one. That's why the Pete Alonso rumor feels more like speculation than a real plan. It sounds good for headlines, it gets fans excited, but when you analyze it, it just doesn't fit with what the Yankees are trying to build. And think about the timing. Alonso's age and contract demand mean you're paying for his decline years. If he wants 7 years, that takes him through age 38. You know how that story usually ends. By the last 2 or 3 seasons of that deal, he's likely a designated hitter only, with limited mobility and declining bat speed. You're paying premium money for half the production. Meanwhile, players like Judge and possibly Bellinger would still be on big contracts too, and you'd be locking yourself into another decade of payroll crunch. Now, imagine a different approach. Instead of spending big on Alonso, what if the Yankees focused on developing their younger players while strategically adding one major piece? Guys like Ben Rice, Austin Wells, and Anthony Volpe represent the next wave. They bring energy, upside, and cheap years under team control. If you trust that core, you can afford to spend big on one true difference maker, maybe a Kyle Tucker type, instead of another slugger who can only do one thing well. Tucker fits modern baseball better. Contact, power, defense, speed, and still young enough that a long contract makes sense. That's why the Alonso idea feels like the kind of move the old Yankees would have made. A flashy name, a big bat, and not much thought beyond the next season or two. But the modern Yankees need to be smarter than that. They've seen what happens when you overload on one type of player. You end up with a lineup that looks great in April, but falls apart when the pitching ramps up in October. But before we continue, please remember to join our channel and give this video a like. Your support allows us to keep bringing you the latest news about the New York Yankees. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments. Rumors are swirling through the Bronx, and if they prove true, the Yankees may have just pulled off one of the biggest pitching moves of the offseason. According to whispers around the league, Luis Castillo, the electric right-hander known for his devastating fastball changeup combination, is set to become the newest arm in the Yankees' rotation. While no official announcement has been made, insiders suggest that talks between the Yankees and the Mariners have been heating up for weeks, culminating in what could be a blockbuster deal that sends the all-star pitcher to New York. For fans, this news feels like the missing puzzle piece finally sliding into place. The Yankees have long been chasing another ace to complement Garrett Cole, and Castillo, with his power stuff and proven poise in big moments, fits that role perfectly. The 31-year-old Dominican has built a reputation as one of the most consistent and competitive pitchers in the American League, a workhorse capable of logging 180-plus innings while keeping opposing lineups off balance. His arrival would instantly deepen the Yankees' rotation and bring a sense of dominance that has been lacking since the departure of several key arms. Clubhouse chatter reportedly spiked after players caught wind of the potential move. He's the kind of guy who changes a team's entire energy. One anonymous player was quoted as saying, "When you know he's taking the mound, you feel like you're already halfway to a win." The front office, led by Brian Cashman, has remained tight-lipped, but sources close to the organization hint that final details are being ironed out. Some speculate that the Yankees may have parted with a top prospect or two, possibly a high-upside outfielder or young infielder, to get the deal across the finish line. If confirmed, this acquisition could signal a renewed push for a championship in 2025. The Yankees' faithful have grown restless, craving a return to October glory. And with Luis Castillo potentially donning the pinstripes, that dream suddenly seems a lot more real. For now, it's all still rumor, but it's the kind of rumor that makes the city buzz, the kind that turns a quiet off-season in a headline frenzy. The Bronx might be about to get its next ace, and baseball's biggest stage may soon belong to Luis Castillo. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the New York Yankees, please subscribe to our channel and give us a like. We always appreciate your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.